In November of 2018, California was in crisis. Wildfires were ravaging the state, destroying over 18,000 properties, displacing over 1,000 families, and killing 85 people. This catastrophe was shocking in its scale, but not in its nature. Similar wildfires had broken out in 2016 and 2017, and experts were predicting that with shorter snowfalls and longer summers, global warming would make this pattern only worsen in the years that followed. This led California Governor Jerry Brown to give us all a warning heard by none other than the Strokes.
And work through this tragedy. The way I would describe it, and I'm going to amend something I said before, this is not the new normal, this is the new abnormal.
Here's a fun fact to offset that sad one. Julian Casablancas hates Last Night. Maybe not literally, it's a fantastic song, the Strokes' biggest for a reason. As one of the band's first singles, it captured their spirit perfectly. 5 guys from disparate backgrounds brought together by as much of a love of music as a love of partying and putting on the first thing they saw on the laundry pile every morning. They tore through New York's indie scene so fast that they basically defined it for the better part of a decade, and with the release of their debut studio album, Is This It, in 2001, it seemed they had nowhere to go but up. But the next decade was spent doing just about everything but thriving. Their sophomore album, Room on Fire, was overshadowed by various world tours cutting into their writing time. First Impressions of Earth had the benefit of a years-long production to try new things, but nothing that really captured the attention of casual listeners. Then Angles and Comedown Machine featured so much drama behind the scenes, it's a wonder they were ever finished. The phrase on people's tongues was diminishing returns. All the while, they strived to make another Is This It, either by capturing its sound, its energy, or its innovation. But at every turn, they seemed to fail. For over a decade, Julian Casablancas had to sing the same song at concerts over and over, just because it was the biggest. Just because the Strokes could not top Last Night. As time went on, they only encountered less reasons to work together. Physical distance was added when they moved out of their shared apartments into suburbs and across the country. Emotional distance when some got married, some had children, and sadly, some drug issues rose up. And a creative distance when the side projects started. Guitarist Albert Hammond Jr. was the first to release a solo album in 2006, followed by frontman Julian in 2009. That gave way to a new band, The Voids, which inspired new bands from drummer Fabrizio Moretti, guitarist Nick Valenci, and bassist Nikolai Fraiture. By the dawn of the 2010s, they were miles apart in just about every use of the metaphor, and the idea of the Strokes became more and more conceptual every day. The occasional mention was made by one member that they were working on something, just to be denied by another. Rumors of a breakup were raised and put down with a shrug. When asked in 2015 if he knew anything about a possible future project, Albert simply replied, "No, I don't." Despite this, just a year later, the band would release something new, though not an album. The EP Future Past Present came out in June of 2016. Composed of just 3 new songs and 1 remix, it was a real head-scratcher for fans. Much like their last project, Comedown Machine, there was no big promotion, hardly any interviews, and just a handful of performances supporting it. What we did have was one quote from Julian Casablancas that basically implied the band members were just as much out of the loop as we were.
The new songs sound so great on this EP, Drag Queen, Oblivious, and Thread of Joy. Were they the only 3 that you guys kind of worked on when you were making this EP, or is it part of a selection of other songs that are in varying states?
No, we worked together kind of without an agenda, and then 3 songs kind of appeared, so I just thought, hey, why don't we just put these out? And everyone said, that's a terrible idea.
What was plainly obvious was that the Strokes didn't know what they were doing. Since the release of their first album, they were basically just making it up as they went along, trying to create music that sounded cool. That isn't a problem for most bands. With one strong leader at the helm, there's only one person's schedule and creative process that really matters. Anyone who disagrees is welcome to leave. But the Strokes were all or nothing. They split the credit, they split the income, they split the name. Either they all showed up to record or none of them did. Except for that one time. So now they were structureless, rudderless, empty. What they needed was a leader, someone who was capable of bossing them around, someone who had a reputation for saving struggling projects, someone somehow more mysterious than even the Strokes. Someone like Rick Rubin. Rick is a special case. He isn't a conductor, he isn't a musician, he's not a DJ, he doesn't make any music himself. What he is a scholar, of music, a champion of it. He's been working in the industry for decades, helping some of your favorite bands release some of their best albums with nothing more than a nod here and a tweak in arrangements there. I've heard him be called a guru, and I've found that to be the best descriptor. Albert Hammond even leaned into this imagery, saying there was this figure to pull us together and tell us what to do. It was a bit like being a child in school. Better yet, as I hinted at earlier, he was sort of famous for working with bands at the end of their rope. A key reason why Julian Casablancas feels Rubin became interested in the Strokes.
I was going to talk about Rick, actually. Was he the definite first port of call for you guys in making this new album?
Yeah, I think he had probably deemed that we had fallen far enough that we were worth rescuing.
Rick would later disagree with this point, despite the fact that the band had sought his help with production duties twice prior, only to be rejected until 2017, a year after what really looks like a failed attempt at an album. Instead, he argued that there was just a legitimate change in the sound of the band's music that caught his attention, and on that point, I can't really disagree. The Strokes' rise to fame inspired what we call the garage rock revival, a new genre inspired heavily by older rock and punk music. The Strokes themselves rejected the garage rock label for the simple reason that they were from Manhattan. They never played in a garage. But the title more so references a sort of homegrown sound and feeling that the Strokes absolutely embodied. They were raw and unfiltered, their equipment was slapdash, their producer Gordon Raphael was an engineer with big dreams. They recorded their songs live with almost no effects or special tweaking. But a lot changed in those nearly 20 years. Starting with First Impressions of Earth, they allowed themselves oodles of time in the studio to experiment and advance their music. They worked with new producers and explored a bigger sound. By the time of Comedown Machine, they weren't just dodging the garage rock accusations over a simple misnomer, they were stepping into all new territory. One with less of a live feel, less guitar, less screaming, but more of something else. Something the band was seemingly struggling to develop. Maybe that is what caught Rick Rubin's attention. The demos he received were short, nowhere near finished songs, but with plenty of potential. So Rick invited the Strokes to his studio, Shangri-La, another key piece of the puzzle. It was built years before Rubin got involved in music by Bob Dylan and the band, but by 2011, it had seen better days and was on the verge of demolition. He took control and turned it into his home base, and so it became the Strokes' home base as they started their over 2-year-long journey together, making a proper 6th album. It had been years since each member of the band embarked on their solo journeys, and years more since every song on a Strokes album was credited to Julian Casablancas. By now, it was almost guaranteed that each member would bring their own tracks to the table as options for the new album. But most of these would be disregarded. Not in favor of any one person's music either, but for those written by all of them. Despite his denial that he only agreed to work with the Strokes once they were close enough to ruin, Rick Rubin couldn't deny that they were close to ruin. He'd later explained that early on he realized that you guys live far apart from each other. You don't play in a room together all the time. It felt like everybody was happy to see each other, but there was a lack of that daily familiarity. His remedy for this was to start every day, every session of recording or discussing music, with a jam, just an hour of loose, fun, low-stakes experimentation. It was an attempt at capturing the spirit of a young band, banging out songs together in what could only technically be called a studio as they worked out what it really meant to be a band. This was essential. It brought the Strokes back to their roots in a very real way and knocked down thick walls that were built up over many years. And the microphones were always running, meaning songs like The Adults Are Talking were basically built from the ground up during one of these jams. We even hear this experimentation explicitly on Ode to the Mets, which they started recording while Fab was out of the room eating a sandwich. Though he did manage to rush back in and slide behind his drum set just in time for Julian's famous line.
Drums, please, Fab.
So does this mean that all their problems were solved and the Strokes moved back in together and never fought again? No. I think their recent release schedule should tell you that, and there was still many disagreements. The funniest of which being when the band couldn't decide on a music video for Bad Decisions, so Albert just made one without telling them using a bunch of deepfakes. The worst part is that it's genuinely hilarious. Still, it's a far cry from some of their early albums, with production stories that they refuse to talk about in detail for fear of offending one another, with tales of massive egos and verbal barbarism. Albert Hammond would say that I felt like we were a band again. Nick Valenci would gush about having so many fond memories from the production. And even Julian Casablancas, who struggles to say anything at all in interviews, managed to squeak out, "I feel good about this record." By February of the new year, this was proven true when the band felt good enough about the record to reveal it on their social medias along with the announcement of a big comeback show, performing at a Bernie Sanders rally in New Hampshire. This and a few politically tinged lyrics on the album itself would lead many journalists and fans to wonder why the band would take this sudden political left turn, I guess while conveniently ignoring the existence of New York City cops on their first album. They ain't too smart. The political nature of the New Strokes would be echoed in the title of their new album, The New Abnormal. Like I said at the beginning, the band caught that speech by Jerry Brown in 2018 during the wildfires, but they didn't just choose the title because it sounded cool. Shangri-La was terrifyingly close to that year's Woolsey fire around Malibu. It was by pure chance that the studio was spared and all their work and the history of Shangri-La wasn't lost. That gave the band a very real connection to this tragedy and the debates surrounding it. In another world, the New Abnormal would have been remembered for political statements like this. The Strokes would have gone on to perform dozens of shows around the world, recapturing the excitement and gratisfaction of their youth. There would have been interviews and television appearances everywhere. Unfortunately, they waited just a little too long to get their shit together. They released their new album on April 10th, 2020. 1 month earlier, The Who declared COVID-19 a pandemic, and shutdowns were ordered around the world. These were originally scheduled to last 2 weeks. They did not. The Strokes were no strangers to releasing albums on the heels of major events. There's a good reason why some of you may never have heard of New York City cops, but this was different. After nearly a decade of hibernation, 2020 was meant to be the year the Strokes re-entered the mainstream. Instead, interviews and television appearances were made significantly more complicated and less frequent, which is great for people like me. The world tour was postponed indefinitely, and the name of the album was seen as a strangely prophetic coincidence. The New Abnormal, with a vast and introspective sound that Rick Rubin so expertly helped develop, and lyrics about loss and isolation that came from nowhere but Julian's melancholic mind, was now a quarantine album. This very well may have influenced what came next, as the Strokes' 6th LP became their biggest since their first. Positive reviews began to flood in. The album peaked at number 1 on Billboard's top sales chart. The singles permeated radio stations, YouTube, and the newly established hitmaker TikTok. A brand new generation of fans were introduced to the band, including myself. And a year later, the Strokes would take to Zoom, in an era-appropriate fashion, to accept the Grammy for Best Rock Album, the highest honor they'd ever received, at least from the otherwise out-of-touch world of mainstream music. But one song in particular has soared above and beyond its fellow tracks from 2020. The Adults Are Talking has amassed over 740 million streams on Spotify, and considering how often this song autoplays after pretty much any alternative rock album, it's well on its way to dethroning the Strokes' first hit single as their biggest. Congrats, Julian. But that wasn't the real success of the New Abnormal. Sure, gold statues and gold records are nice, but from the beginning, the band have been adamant that they aren't in it for the money. They turned down commercials, they turned down suffocating record contracts, they turned down the MTV Video Music Awards, which in 2002 was like flipping off a mafia boss. That actually may have severely damaged their career, but they didn't care. Julian would explain, since the day the Strokes got signed, it was this wrestling match between doing cool creative things and smart marketing things. And they've always favored the cool creative things. That became harder as time went on. It's hard to innovate when you're arguing over every decision. So eventually, they stopped working together. The New Abnormal was a success because it solved that problem. It taught them how to have fun again. Even if there have been a few interviews since then that imply some serious trouble in paradise, I don't think it's anything they can't solve, or anything they haven't solved before. The bond survives. Like during lockdown. Without the traditional methods of album promotion or anything better to do, the boys took to YouTube to start a Zoom call video series, or as they'd call it, a pirate radio show podcast thing. And they were really good at it.
Don't know how to start, but welcome all. You not wearing pants, Albert? Oh,
I'm wearing pants.
I thought it was your bare ass as you walked away.
Wow, I had no idea that was a fucking animatronic.
That's a robot?
No.
We should do an episode of this Zoom thing where we're all just mad close. Zoomed in.
Like this? If you were an animal, what would you be? I'm sure you've been asked this, but sometimes I find that interesting.
Never
a
really
dragon?
Never thought about it.
that's not 50-50, is it?
No, that's chances.
During the Corona thing, I wear pants. I wear a hazmat suit when I'm in the house usually.
Just no underwear though. You go commando in the hazmat.
With a condom on. My drums sound great.
Yeah, can you hear that bass? Man, cut through so nice.
Amazing.
Quick backtrack.
Say hi to him later too, by the way.
Looks like we got a Zoom bomber here.
Yeah. Hello, Colin. How are you?
Hi, guys.
You promised, Albert.
You promise.
You promised.
Promiser.
Liar!
How dare you?
Liar! You guys want to talk about Bernie or no?
Yeah. We had an infamous First Impressions tour where we only played First Impressions before the album came out.
In Japan.
In Japan.
We're living in some strange times, man. Some strange times.
You're painting, morphing into your head.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you so much for coming.
It's been a pleasure talking. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and I look forward to seeing all of you sooner than later.
Right on, man.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks,
See you
Rick.
soon, hopefully.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. That was a lot of fun.
All bands reach a breaking point eventually. It's just what time naturally does to a group of creative people. But the Strokes beat the odds. They managed to push past their differences without tearing each other apart, and better yet, they did it without getting any lawyers involved. That's more than can be said for the Beatles. Paul McCartney had to sue his bandmates just to get out of their suffocating contract, all while working on his greatest solo album ever, Ram. If only there was some video you could watch on that subject. Say, from a series called McCartney After the Beatles on Nebula right now. Huh? Nebula is a creator-owned prestige streaming service, and for years, they've been helping produce original and exclusive videos from some of the most talented people online right now, like Adam Neely and Shay Frillis. Last year, Nebula approached me about making my own exclusive series, and it was fantastic. They edited while I wrote, meaning I could produce twice as many videos. That's how episode 1 came out in December, episode 2 came out in January, and episode 3 came out last month. Better yet, the series is all about my favorite songwriter at the most interesting and turbulent time in his career. McCartney After the Beatles was a blast to make. The best part is, if you go to nebula.tv/markbutevil or scan the QR code on screen, not only will you be supporting my channel, you get 50% off an annual subscription. Seriously, thank you to everyone who's been keeping up with the series and giving positive feedback. It means the world. Again, the place to go is nebula.tv/markbutevil for a discount and loads of exclusive videos. Give it a shot today.
Are you Nikolai, you're doing this. Are you sharing this with us on purpose?